Good morning. Welcome back to the show. We've got an amazing podcast. So on today's show, I'm pleased to have on Paul Smith, who's a renowned property millionaire and entrepreneur. We delve into how Paul went from corporate CEO into full-time property and create one of the most successful property training companies in the UK. We also discuss how he sees the UK property market evolving in the next 5 to 10 years. But Paul also opens up about how he balances his investment between traditional assets like property versus modern assets like Bitcoin. So stay tuned till the end and we see how Paul is one of the 10,000 millionaires who left the UK recently to live in Monaco. So stay tuned, watch this video. It's going to be mind compelling. It's fantastic. Let's do this. Good stuff, Paul. Nice to see you. How are you doing?
I am doing very well, but then, if you're in Palm Beach in Florida, you should be doing well, shouldn't you?
I was just going to ask you. So, what are you doing in Palm Beach? What takes you to Palm Beach?
This is my 4th trip this year, and it's medical. I'm working on my immune system. I'm using my own stem cells to boost my own immune system. Bore you with the details, but at the age of 14, I've got this thing called Crohn's disease, which is an autoimmune disease. And there's 2 ways you can deal with that. You can either suppress the immune system so it doesn't attack you, which is great, but it means you'll basically go and die from something else. I'm not kidding, common flu or something. Or,
really? Wow.
Yeah, really. Or you can boost your immune system. And for me, I'm an engineer. If it's broke, let's fix it. So my immune system's broken, so I'm fixing it. That's stage 1. Stage 2 is this year, one of my projects is to raise tens of millions to get the treatment protocol I'm going through FDA approved, because there's roughly 1 billion people on the planet that could benefit from what I'm experiencing.
Right.
But I'm in the very fortunate position that I can afford to pay $1 million for it. Most people can't. So I want to make.
Is that a lifetime cost or is that yearly?
That's this year.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
You're kidding me. Wow.
I'm doing it extensively this year, but I would say minimum to follow this protocol, you want between $50,000 and $100,000 a year for life. Right. And that's just so far out of the reach of most people.
Yeah.
But if we can make it mass market, listen to me, it's not mine. I'm just working with the doctor that's developed it. He can do the medical stuff. I'll do the money stuff. And, because it helps with things like Alzheimer's and dementia.
I didn't know that, really.
Imagine a world where there's none of that.
Well, it's a horrible disease, isn't it? And it's the thing, if you can kind of work towards something like that, I think that's fantastic what you're doing. And can I ask, how long have you been doing that for?
Let me just think exactly, 2016, so 8 years.
Right. Interesting. Wow. And that's why you're in Palm Beach then? Is it a vacation as well, or do you kind of do both?
Well, the other thing that's coming back to my core vocation, I suppose, of education is my 18-year-old, my youngest daughter, Jenny, she's just going out to New York to start 4 years first degree. So she's doing a first degree just outside New York. So this weekend coming, we're actually going up there to, help her get settled in and choose things and all that.
Sign it up.
Yeah, so it's kind of family, kind of medical, but on the other hand, what I can't say is it's kind of rough, because it isn't. It's I'm in a little Airbnb, which I love. I'm 5 minutes from the sea. It's like, life's good.
Yeah, it looks good. So just to, obviously, that's fantastic, and it's great to hear how things are happening with you, with sort of basing yourself in Palm Beach and bettering your health, which I think is fantastic. I think that's just an amazing thing. But what would be good for the viewers is, obviously we met, I think I was just talking to you offline, 2018 initially. I was looking to, I guess, invest into property. I didn't know where to go. And this guy called Paul Smith just kept popping up on every single feed. And I was like, this guy looks really interested. And I did a course back in 2019. It was a service accommodation course. And I kind of started to go more into property. So it'll be really good to kind of understand a bit more about you. You know, how did you start your journey from corporate CEO? What my understanding is from your background, working all the hours God sends, really stressed out, to then setting up a property company.
Yeah. Well, before we go there, by the way, well done you for, just getting out of your own way, doing the course and whatever. So before we go any further, you did the service accommodation course, didn't you? And the essay is going all right for you, even at 6, 7
going really well. We scaled up. I've got five units now, but it's not rent to rent. I was just doing it purely on buying them an investment. But then we'll talk more about it. But I got sort of down a rabbit hole last year on Bitcoin.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so did I, but a bit longer ago than last year. But yeah. Okay. So classic good boy, work hard at school, get your exams, go and do university, get a good job. So I did all that. So by the time I'm, 22, 23, I've got my first degree and I'm working. My first job was with Ford's, making engines. After that, I started working my way up the corporate ladder. And by fast forward to the time I'm 34 was the first time I got onto the board of a company, Whitbread. And then by 38, I was up in Scotland as managing director of Allied Distillers, which was at the time the number 2 spirits Scotch whisky company in the world. 26 distilleries, almost 3,000 staff, turnover in the billions. Profit I was making 400 or 500 million a year. And yeah, I was not seeing my kids at all. I've got 6, by the way, so they're ridiculously important to me, as they probably are to every parent. And to an extent, life was good. And I share this figure openly. In 2003, which was the last year that I worked for anybody else, in the UK, when you work for someone, you get a P11D, which is your statement of pay and benefits. My last one was 411,000, and that's more than 20 years ago, Simon. So that wasn't like yesterday afternoon. So I was getting well paid for it, but it was, I could be in 4 different countries in a week. I was, if I got to spend one day at home, I was lucky. And this is going to sound very glamorous, but I'd go to work, I'd go out to some sort of business lunch, come back and do a bit of work in the afternoon, nip home, get changed. My chauffeur, I had a chauffeur, basically because we were always drinking at these, various dues. I couldn't drive. And then out to some, typically 2, possibly 3 social engagements in the evening, looking after customers, some sort of press call. It was just mad. And if I got any change out of 14 hours a day work, I was doing well. And then,
did you enjoy that at all, or was it just stress?
You do. Well, I don't know. No. Okay. Here's the thing. Because I do what I do, I say to people, what does financial freedom mean and whatever. And generally they say another $5,000 a month or another $10,000 a month. Those are the 2 magic figures.
Yeah.
So for me, when I got that job, I was going from like 200 grand to 400 grand. So it was an extra 200,000 a year. Wow. So it was like an extra 4 grand a week or 5 grand a week or something stupid. So there is that initial attraction. It's like dopamine or something. You've just had this massive hit and you're thinking, to an extent, the money in corporate world validates you as an individual and you think, I'm doing really well. And then you got to start paying for it. So yes, I had a good salary. I had a nice car. I had a chauffeur. All my mates thought I could walk on water because I was doing all this stuff. There's things that probably I would have just said no to, because I've always been, sadly, 3 of my 4 grandparents and 1 of my parents passed away with cancer because they were all smokers. And so there's things like, no, it's fine. I'm just explaining that I would never work for a tobacco company or anything like that. I would never work for a munitions company. I would never make lethal weapons. But Scotch whisky is quite alluring. It's kind of, it's fancy. It's not like making, what's that dodgy side? I'm probably going to get sued now. Like White Lightning or something like that.
Oh yeah, it's a really dodgy one.
Well, I mean, it's white lightning isn't for a cultural experience, is it?
No.
It's to knock you. It's anesthetic. So I had the sort of ridiculous salary. It looked very glamorous traveling around all these different countries. I was in a sector that's perceived by many people to be quite aspirational, international premium spirits. So that was all, I suppose, good. But I was looking for something more than there was, or more than there is in corporate life. I was looking for purpose, fulfillment, the ability to live my life as I want it. And you can't do those things if you're working for someone else.
No.
And yes, I was getting well paid, but let's put this into context, Simon. I was earning, if I rounded it up, and probably was with benefits, with pension and stuff, I was probably earning 500,000 a year. Okay, so there's me picking up 500 grand in various ways. If I then compare that to how much money was I making for the big corporate beast, I was making them more than 500 million a year. And so I was also in the background, yeah, I'm well paid, but I'm getting a tiny, tiny fraction of the value that I'm creating, and I'm not seeing the kids. And I don't want to do this for another 20 years and just die, because a lot of people in that industry, they will be dead in their 60s.
Just working to the grind.
One of the things that not so much in that job, but when I was a factory manager, one of the things I liked to do and the company liked me to do was just attend, like funerals and stuff, especially for long service employees. And I can remember I was factory manager in Edmonton, North London, not Canada, for Coca-Cola. And the number of people that I'd given their long service watch at the age of 60 or 65, and then 1 year later, I'm by the side of their grave and I've got a black suit on and a black tie.
No way,
unbelievable.
Really?
Unbelievable.
Do you think that was work related?
Well,
it was an
actually, I think it's lack of work related. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. Some people, work is their life, and they think they're going to retire and have this happy retirement, and they don't do anything. They just go from being flat out busy to doing nothing. Their life hasn't got a purpose anymore, and they just die. And I saw that a lot. And I don't know if that's anything anyone can relate to, but that was just my life. And so I could see myself being in that position when I was in my 60s, and I didn't want it.
No, of course. And how did you transpire to sort of migrate to setting up Touchstone Education? What was the...
Okay, briefly.
Why property, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, why property? I'd been doing property since I was 18 on the side. So I was never as stressed as some of my work colleagues, because I always had this second income stream.
Right.
And very, very briefly, I bought my first ever property, 269A East Ham, place, Roman Road it's called, and was the street. And I bought that for 9 grand. And the rest is history. And I just never stopped. I had my first joint venture HMO. I didn't even know it was an HMO. There was no such thing then when I was 23, which is, Christ, 37 years ago. I'm 60 in a few weeks. So, so I always did property on the side. And what happened was my last job with Allied was to sell the company. So I was part of the team that sold the company for 18.6 billion, which is quite a lot.
It's a huge, staggering fee.
Of course it is. It's ridiculous. But I was an employee, not a shareholder.
Yeah. So
how many times has the idiot here got to be taught the lesson before he finally realizes that you can get a salary, but from my perspective, a salary is something that they give you. It's like a bribe to forget your dreams. And the number of million, I can't even tell you how many billion I made for other people. And all I made was a living. I do like that expression. I don't know if you're familiar with it. A formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune. And that's really where I transition. Because, I mean, how many people in the world even now are earning like $500,000 a year? Not many. How many small business owners?
Purpose. This is what I always hear from people as well. You know, are they enjoying it? Self-fulfillment, all that kind of stuff, you know?
But how many small business owners are making even better money? They might only have 4 or 5 staff, but they could easily be making up 600-700 grand a year. And you just look at it and you think, who's the idiot? So anyway, as part of all that, me and the missus got both made redundant on the same day, because that's how we met. So we went from $750,000 to nothing in terms of income. And we thought, what should we do now? And so it's a bit of a shock. But we thought, no, we're not going to work for anyone else ever again. And we went full time into property. We bought a couple of other businesses as well. And by 2014, we'd started Touchstone Education.
When was that? Sorry, 2014?
2014, 10 years ago.
And that started as property training, did it?
Yes, it did. But from 2004, when we were both, full-time property people, up until 2014, so that 10 years is exactly 10 years, more and more of our friends were saying, what are you doing? You ain't got a job. Why don't you go and get a proper job? And we were like, and we were having safaris in Africa. We were going on, all these various trips. And like, how are you doing that? And we said, well, property. I said, you can't do that through property. Well, you can actually. And so over the years, we had more and more people coming to us saying, how are you doing that? And by 2014, we thought, well, I love teaching. My dad was a teacher. My granddad was a teacher. My mum was a teacher. And I thought, well, I don't want to teach history or geography. I just want to teach money. And from a, I suppose, leverage perspective, same as mortgage is a financial leverage. I love working with people one-to-one, but for maximum benefit, I've got to be working with people 1 to 200 or 1 to 1,000.
Yeah, of course.
Because my mission these days is I'm trying to make 1 million people millionaires. That's what I want to do.
How far are you up with that? What number are you on now?
I'm at 10,000. But I'm sure you'd understand, and anyone listening to this will understand, if I've got an aspiration to help 1 million people, I literally can't do that one-to-one. I'd be long dead before I got anywhere with that scheme, wouldn't I?
Yeah.
So I just thought, well, let's do it properly. Because if schools and universities want to educate people, they don't do it one at a time. So we officially set up Touchstone Education. Yeah, it was, I couldn't tell you which month, it's gone out of my head, but it was definitely 2014, which amazing. By coincidence is 10 years ago. Yeah. And now we're typically running, different from when you were kind enough to come and see us. I was probably running, in 2018, I'd have been running classroom events for kind of 30 to 60 people maybe. What we do now is everything's online, so I can do it from wherever I want in the world. And typically we'll have between 400 and 500 people from a much bigger geographical reach.
Wow, that's huge.
And those events we run typically 4 times a month. So we've gone from 1-to-1 for the first 10 years, set up Touchstone. It was more like 1 to maybe 50. Now it's 1 to 500, but multiple times a month. So the benefit from my perspective is I work, in inverted commas, maybe, I don't call it work because I love doing it. Work for me is something you get paid for that you don't want to do. Because
more. Yeah,
that's work in a nutshell for me. So now we're at the point of I'm trading my time, because that's what you do when you work. You swap your time for money. I'm trading my time a lot less than I used to. It's maybe 6 or 8 days a month, but the reach of the people that I'm working with properly is 2,000 people. So I'm probably working with 20 to 30,000 people a year. And the ambition for next year is to double that again.
Oh, really? Doubling down on that? Amazing. And what's just out of interest? Sorry, I interrupted you. Sorry.
No, not at all. I was just going to say that's what we've done for the last 3 or 4 years.
That's
and
fantastic.
Do you know what they say? What's that expression? When life gives you lemons, you should make lemonade. Yeah. Now, for us, the lemon that we were given as a company was the whole lockdown thing, because we were a physical events company. Touchstone was, it served its customers. It operated by doing face-to-face training courses. We couldn't do it anymore. So we took the whole business online within 6 months, and that enabled us to keep doubling the size of the business every year.
Yeah. It's amazing what the pandemic did for businesses. Yeah. I mean, that's crazy. It just created a whole whole new sort of paradigm for Touchstone. That's really
Correct.
interesting.
And I'll probably get this wrong, but I think it was the Prime Minister of Denmark said that the first 10 weeks of lockdown have increased internet adoption by 10 years, and we're not going back. And I mean, it's just normal now, isn't it? Hybrid working,
yeah.
Zoom.
Well, look at us. You're in Palm Beach. I'm in London.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and you couldn't tell really.
And what sort of, just sort of circling with that, what sort of the sort of struggles, I guess, within, you know, the initial part of setting up that business? What was the real sort of hardship that you sort of learned from that?
Well, anytime you start doing anything new, you take a few knocks, don't you? So, or I do anyway, tend to, you know, like even take it really simple. When you first learn to ride a bike, you tend to fall off and it hurts.
Yeah.
So, so was property new to me? No, because even by then, I've been doing property for 42 years now as an investor.
You've got that huge experience behind you.
Yeah, for sure. So even 10 years ago, it was, you know, I'd still been doing it for 30 odd years. Employing people, well, Annika, my wife and myself, we'd worked our way up different paths, but we'd worked our way up through bigger and bigger companies. And we'd gone from managing, you know, 10 or 20 people to thousands of people. So was managing people a big issue for us? No. Unlike most people that start small businesses, we'd been in big businesses. So the whole idea of systems and discipline was normal to us. So that was all good. What was completely and utterly new to me, because I'm quite old school in many things, so I've had to pin it down to one thing, was probably social media, because that was when the whole Facebook thing was really exploding. You know, in 2014, TikTok and Instagram weren't even a thing, were they? I mean, they just, nobody did it. And for the first time, because all during my corporate career, there'd been a degree of professional respect. And the thing I had to learn to deal with was, I love quotes, and I love Mark Twain in particular. Mark Twain said famously, never argue with an idiot. They'll drag you down to their level and they'll beat you with experience. So I spent probably far too long taking things that were said on social media broadly far too seriously. And if somebody just out and out abused me, I would still try and reason with them. And I would still try and, because instinctively I want to help everyone. And even now, I'm a recent convert to TikTok and Instagram. And
I saw you popping up on it because I'm on it as well. It took me a long time. I only went into it 6 months ago, but it's just another great platform, you know.
Probably the same. And so on Instagram, for instance, I've got multiple videos. I think my biggest video on Instagram as we're recording this is 2.9 million views.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and I've got multiple that are way into the millions, and it is amazing. But you have to focus on the people that want to be helped, because there's a group of people that are like, what are you doing on Instagram? You know, you shouldn't be on Instagram in your 90s. And now they obviously know I'm not 90. And so I just don't engage with those people.
Well, these are comments people are putting there.
Yeah, it's like, you shouldn't, what are you even doing on here? Old boy. You know, they use slightly ruder words than that. And I'll also get multiple comments about my physical appearance. There'll be people, yes. Yeah, but it doesn't bother me anymore. But what you asked the question, what was the thing I had to learn? So I get a huge amount of criticism about my hair, for instance. I get a huge amount of criticism about.
At least you've got hair, Paul.
Yeah.
Could be worse.
I'm just telling you what I get. You must get. You probably get something different. I get statements like, if you're really a millionaire, you'd do something about them teeth. You know, what you dress like that for. But it's not the majority. That's 5 or 10%. But to come back to your point, I used to be overly focused on that 5 and 10%.
Right.
70, 80% of people are really positive. 10% are kind of neutral. And I would say 5 to 10% are quite aggressive. And I know it's because they're having a bad day, but I can't control their life. And and if they don't want to be helped, and if they want to be miserable and aggressive, well, fine. So
Yeah.
where I've got to now is crack on. If you're having a go at me, you're probably not having a go at somebody else, and I don't care.
Yeah, and they're probably not right for property investment at this time.
No, or anything else, because I don't only talk about property. I'll talk about gold. I'll talk about Bitcoin, but it is mainly property.
Yeah.
I suppose in a general sense, what I'll talk about is business, wealth, and assets. Those are the three things that I tend to talk about.
While on that note, actually, this is something that's popping up in my mind quite a lot, and the thoughts are around probably my son, actually, that the school system, I feel, is completely broken for today's world. Do you kind of agree with that? I mean, we're not teaching kids; we're teaching kids to be employees. They don't know anything about banking or
no,
assets.
100%. And there's two issues just to share with you on precisely that point. I'm lucky enough to have 6 kids, and I've got 2 grandchildren. My youngest grandchild is called Harrison, cute little thing, lovely little boy. He's 2. He's 2.5. And I do sat there, late at night, just thinking to myself, is anything that Harrison is going to learn at school going to be of any earthly use to him? Because he's about to get, confined to the educational system from the age of 4 to the age of 18. So he's going to spend 14 years of his life. What benefit?
Yeah.
Because, somebody said to me the other day, they asked me that question. They said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, did you learn a foreign language at school? Oh, and they were very proudly telling me they learned 3. They learned French, German, and Spanish or something. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. I said, have you seen these things? And they're just like little Apple AirPods, the things you put in your ear? And I could be talking to you in Mandarin Chinese. You could be talking to me in Hungarian, and they would instantly translate.
Wow, it's just unbelievable. I've seen something like that. I just think that's phenomenal. It just
already
makes the
exists.
world so much smaller, doesn't it?
Well, yes, but specifically, the question that leads to in my mind is, what's the point of learning foreign languages? Because you're younger than me, but when I was at school, way back when, calculators were totally illegal. You couldn't use, so they existed, they were very expensive in the 1970s, early 70s. And there was something called a Polish logic calculator. Now, I defy anyone that hasn't, so you couldn't use it without, a good amount of education.
Yeah.
But the way I learned to calculate big numbers and deal with mathematical concepts was with a slide rule and log tables. Most people don't know what that is. So all of my maths was based on slide rules and log tables that don't even exist anymore. And so huge amounts, even of my education, were totally wasted.
Yeah.
And I've seen it firsthand I've got Jenny's 18, so she's just finished her A-level equivalent. She did an international baccalaureate. Jude is 16. And even with that, over the last year, as I'm sure you know, ChatGPT has come in. And the school originally told them that, no, you're not allowed to use it. If you use it, you'll potentially be expelled. And, and then because it was just new technology and the system was scared of it.
Yeah.
By the end of last term, the teachers were using it to mark homework.
And the irony. But I think that's what's going to happen with AI, right? I mean, it's scary to think how much or how quickly the landscape is evolving, because I use it religiously in our business. We create, thumbnails for YouTube. We create it, content, YouTube posts or whatever, Facebook, all this kind of stuff. And it's just speeding up the process. But because I love technology, and I really do believe that I think with AI, I think there's going to be a lot more about AI operators. You'll be an AI operator of some sort, like ChatGPT. You'll be controlling that with your team to get more out of your productivity.
Sure. You see. And I've said for many years now, the quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions that you ask. Nice. And like any other machine, and I genuinely believe it to be true, like any other machine, or artificial intelligence, give it its proper name. You ask the wrong question, you get the wrong answer.
Yeah.
And that's it. So what is the role of a human? It's to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
Until, of course, we get past the singularity and we hit AGI and they become smarter than us. And then they will tell us what are the right things to do. Can you imagine that?
It reminds me of Star Trek, the
Yeah.
Borgs, when the Borgs kind of took over, and it's almost laughable to even have this conversation, but that's kind of, there's nothing stopping us getting to that point, right? Do you agree?
I can see it clearly. You've got
Legislation, that because that's what they're saying, the government is, or Elon Musk was saying, you've got to slow this down before it goes a mega beast and it starts taking us over.
Well, for sure, but he's the same guy, and I think he's a very intelligent and switched on individual, by the way. He's the same guy that's making the Tesla bot, the Optimus, and Gen 3 is about to be released this year. And by next year, you can probably buy one. But just follow this logic through. I know this is not really what we're supposed to be talking about. Well, I suppose we're talking about.
Good. No, it's good. It's good. It's amazing.
So let's, and he said at Tesla's AGM about 2-3 weeks ago now, that the price of a Gen 3 Optimus would be between $10,000 and $20,000. Can you even compute that number? And that robot, it's got, in terms of its dexterity on its hands, it can do about 70% of the jobs that humans can do.
Wow.
They'll be the single most deflationary product ever manufactured, because the variable cost of labor will drop to the same as that of a robot. And let's say that he does make it for 20 grand. And let's say you've got to do maintenance and you've got to change batteries and you've got to spend parts. And let's say it even costs you 5,000 a year to run one. Let's say, just as a figure. Well, 5,000 a year, divide that by 50 weeks of the year is 100. Divide the 100 by 168 hours. There's 168 hours in a week. But even done, divide it by 100 hours, because let's assume the robot needs maintenance and reprogramming and Christ, I don't know what. Because robots aren't like us. They don't need to sleep. And that means the variable cost of labor drops to $1 an hour.
That's unbelievable, really.
Anyone that's earning more than $1 an hour is at risk. And it isn't just...
Sorry, can I just ask, are these for the workplace, or will these be domesticated as well, do you think, like within the house?
No,
it will be both. Right,
yeah,
interesting.
His vision, I read about him a lot, actually. His vision is that each person will have two. He believes that within 5 years... Yep.
Wow.
He believes that everyone will have two bots. One will be looking after them, and one will be doing some sort of economic activity that adds value and creates money for the household, which is fine, as long as you know what to tell the bot to do.
Yeah, yeah.
And this all goes back to your exact point. What is it that school is going to teach any of your children or any of our children about how to manage in that environment? And if it changes that fast, you got to ask it. Quality of life is dependent on the quality of the questions that you ask.
Absolutely.
It's more true than ever that you got to plug yourself into, let's call it the information matrix, without going too, over the top with this. Because the other thing about Tesla is, I don't know how many of your viewers are familiar with Neuralink. Neuralink is another Elon Musk product. It's basically a chip that gets implanted directly in your brain. And this is the one that he's got initially targeted to help quadriplegics, so people that can't walk. Yeah. And essentially, why can most quadriplegics not walk? It's because their spinal cord has been broken. So their brain works, but it can't communicate and tell the body what to do. Fine, we'll give you another nervous system. Your biological one is broken, so we'll give you a biomechanical one.
Wow.
And you've now got quadriplegics walking again.
And that's what he's working on at the moment, is he? It's
done. Yes, that's one of the things he's working on. But now imagine, now take it a stage further. Simon decides tomorrow afternoon that he wants to learn to be a car mechanic. I'm not saying you would, but just randomly. And you want to work on Audis, and you go to sleep. Neuralink downloads everything you need to know about Audis, and by tomorrow morning you wake up and you're a car mechanic and you can repair Audis. What is there that you couldn't do when your brain is connected directly to the internet and giving you information. Because Einstein said, it's not what you know, it's knowing where to find it.
Mm.
And if where to find it is the internet, and if AGI, artificial general intelligence, is when the machines get smarter than us, if they then clear up the internet one afternoon, which is the kind of thing they can do, so they take all the false and misleading information off the internet, and also take all the stuff off there that's too dangerous for us humans to know about, like anything to do with suicide, anything to do with manufacturing weapons.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Yeah.
Well, it is, but we're not smart enough to make those decisions. They will make them for us. So anything that you're now allowed to learn, you can learn it by going to sleep.
I believe it. So you wake up, literally, you've got this information kind of implanted into you.
Yeah.
It does make you think though, doesn't it, about school, and going back to that, you know, how long has the school system got before it kind of, because what I'm finding as well with my children is they're losing interest, you know, in school. And I think because they live in this digital world and they're always on a screen of some sort throughout the week. I think sitting in a classroom, it's just changing. Sure. They haven't got the patience to sit there like we did.
I think that's true. I think attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. But where does this take me, or where has my brain got to so far? You need to learn to ask good questions. You need to learn how to learn. A good friend of mine has got this expression, and he says, your mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's open. So just think that one through.
I love that.
A parachute that doesn't open is going to hurt, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
And if you're daft enough in this current environment to think you don't need to learn new skills, you're a creature of history. But where that leads me to directly, and it is directly, is it's learn how to learn. You need to ask the right questions. What is the only economic advantage that anyone will have 5 years from now? It's ownership of assets. That's it. Full stop. Now, you need to decide what kind of assets, is my view. Anything that is fiat currency denominated is dangerous, in my view. So you need hard assets. Like I'm sat in one, you're sat in one. A house, that's a hard asset. You need, for me, I know we're not going to agree on all of this, something that's scarce and agreed to be valuable. And so I still see a role for gold. Crypto, in particular, Bitcoin. Any one of these cryptos that was invented yesterday and has got limitless supply, and you know, it doesn't fit the rules. It has to be agreed to. Yes, it needs to be based on the blockchain. It needs to be scarce, and it needs to be agreed to have value. And the final asset, I'm going to sound like a Marxist now, you need to control the means of production. And I think Karl Marx was correct in that.
Do you mean scarce, as in being scarce?
Well, the means of production. He used to mean labor, but the cost of labor is going to tend towards zero. I saw some projections that in the early days, next year, the following year, the cost of a robot dollar hour of production is probably going to be $10. By 2035, it'll be $1. And by 2045, it'll be 10 cents.
Wow.
And what they're doing is they're just following the speed of adoption of things like the motor car.
Yeah.
Have you seen the famous picture of Fifth Avenue in New York, where I think it's 1905 or 1906? There's one car and it's surrounded by this sea of horse-drawn carriages.
Unbelievable.
They then go forward to 1915, 10 years later, and there's now one horse-drawn carriage surrounded by a sea of cars. It's redundant. And that happened in 10 years. This is probably, it could happen in 10 weeks. I'm not saying it will, but you know, the speed of adoption is going to be a lot faster. So the means of production, he meant things like factories. So control of raw materials. I believe the whole net zero, let's manufacture some windmills. Oh, the wind stopped. We haven't got electricity today. I think we're drifting more and more towards nuclear power. And
I agree.
Instead of, but nuclear fission is the one that, atomic bombs, boom, mushroom clouds over Berkhamsted or whatever. Wouldn't be good, would it? But as soon as we get cold fusion, if every home had a cold fusion reactor, and I'm sounding like a futurologist now, and it's the size of a saucepan, and to power your household for the next 2 years, you just need to drop in some grass clippings, then it's a totally, utterly different world. And cold fusion exists now. So cold fusion, for anyone that doesn't know what the hell I'm talking about.
What is cold fusion? I've heard about it, but never actually looked into it. What actually is it?
All matter is energy. So Einstein equals mc squared. So that's how you convert energy into matter times the speed of light squared. So there's a massive amount of energy in any teeny weeny little bit of anything.
Right.
And there's physicists like me. My first degree is engineering, but my strongest subject is actually physics.
Oh,
You've
really?
got this,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Okay. You've got this concept called entropy, which means over time, everything becomes energy. So the universe, so without going too far into that, just to give people a simple idea on it, fission is where you've got nuclear fissile material, like the heavier isotopes of uranium. So nasty stuff, let's call it, generically, radioactive nasty stuff. And you allow enough of it just to come into contact that it generates enormous amounts of heat. And if you put too much of it together, you get an explosion. You get an atomic or a nuclear explosion. And that's why you see nuclear power plants go critical. That's why you hear people, the media talking about, this power plant is losing its cooling, its fuel rods overheat, and there's a danger that it goes bang in the ultimate scenario. Fusion is where you're pushing things together as opposed to blowing things apart. Literally, as its name suggests, you're fusing things. And cold fusion means it's, colder than this cup of coffee. There's nothing to go bang. It isn't dangerous. And it needs to be done under pressure. And, well, does it? That's a different discussion for a different day, probably, with a smarter physicist than me. But the point being, at the minute, you've got a nuclear reactor in a power station that's quite dangerous inherently. Imagine you could get one that's this size and you could stick it in your home and you can produce electricity for nothing.
That's game changing. But is it possible?
It is possible. Well, no, hang on. It's theoretically possible. How much faster do you think we'll get there if we use AGI instead of this? Yeah. So the speed of everything will increase.
That faster adoption of getting to something that you need.
You mentioned earlier on in this discussion, you mentioned Star Trek. The one that I think talks more lucidly about where we are now is Asimov with iRobot, Robot Dawn, the Robot series. So one of the things I did recently was I reread the Robot series. And this is going to sound really right of center. But I think one of the most important things for robotics is actually ethics, morals and ethics. And given that these things are going to be smarter than us, stronger than us, the way in which we harness that and use it as a force for good is, what are the laws? And
it's kind of where we're at now, though, isn't it? With the government saying we need to really sort of pull back, or listening to some of the entrepreneurs say we need to pull back on this and really understand what is this beast and how is it going to affect society.
And for me, that's the core of why it's important. But I mean, to bring all this back to where we started talking about it, education, I personally believe that education is more important than ever. And the cost of where my brain were doing two things at once, the cost of getting it wrong is more expensive at an individual level than it's ever been before. So artificial intelligence passed the New York bar exam. So will we even have solicitors in 5 years? Will we have accountants? So the cost of the expense of not keeping up to date with all of that from an individual level is your livelihood. And here's a question for all the viewers: how are you going to earn any money 5 years from now?
That's really, do you know what? It's funny you say that. Someone, I was watching a YouTube video the other day and someone said, look, rather than focusing on the now with AI and how things are adapting so quickly, focus on where are you going to be, or where could you be in 5 years?
Yep.
meaning whether you're working as an employee for a company, will your job even be there in 5 years?
Yeah. Well,
and I think you said that right. That's critical, absolutely critical.
Plenty of studies, I completely agree. There's plenty of studies that I've seen that say, because of robotics, you've got this increasing automation of manual labor, but because of artificial intelligence, you've got the increasing automation of what used to be called white collar labor or brain labor. And estimates that I put a good degree of faith in, say between 60 and 80% of all the jobs on the planet won't exist in 5 years' time. And if your strategy is sticking your head in the sand, for me, you've got a 4 out of 5 chance of getting blown out of the water.
It's even more important to understand how to invest and
keeping up to date. But one of my mentors, a fantastic guy, well, my mentor, I've only got one, believes that maximum progress is achieved on the border of order and chaos. And we're about to see the biggest joining of order and chaos that we've ever seen in human history. We're living through it. This is a fantastic.
Can I just highlight that? Order and chaos. How do you mean? Like, as in, we've never been in this situation with wars going off and technology moving at such a rapid sort of pace.
What I mean specifically, Simon, is you've got all these societal rules about, for example, we just talked about it. Kids have got to go to school. That is old order. Chaos would be, and I'm not saying this will happen, but it could, at the age of 4, all children are implanted with a chip that means they never need to go to school. As far as their older generations, would that not be chaos?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I've never even thought of that to that degree, even though I know technology's there, but it makes you think, what would society be like? And it comes back to, I suppose, government saying, do we implant these chips? What's the repercussions? I mean, my God, it wouldn't be, you almost think there wouldn't be a society. Everyone's just going to be walking around dumb, knowing everything.
That's what I mean by chaos. And I could give you far more extreme examples. But AGI could easily decide, and I've got to repeat, AGI, artificial general intelligence, that's the point at which machines become more important than humans. AGI may decide that there is no role for government anymore because they're corrupt, they're lazy, they're inept. I mean, do you see many people giving politicians, a good rep? It's like, I'd have thought they'd be the first ones that need to go. And if you're not going to have a society that's governed by politicians, you were talking about war just now, you mentioned it in a sentence. What is the primary reason for war? Governments. And there's enough food on this planet to feed everyone 3 times over. Why are people starving to death? It's inefficiency, it's ineptitude, it's corruption. So when I'm talking about order and chaos, I mean it in a literal sense. But if you bring it to an individual level, what is it about us as individuals, us as a species? Take you back to Darwin. Darwin said in his theory of evolution.
I'm absolutely loving this. This wasn't even on the scripts for everyone that knows. This is even better. It's just making you realize, actually, we've got to look after ourselves. What's around the corner,
We do.
Oh my God.
But Darwin said all those years ago, centuries ago, he said, it's not the strongest of the species that will survive. It's the one that's most adaptable to change.
I've got friends and family members that they don't like change. And with me as an entrepreneur, because I've had quite a few businesses over the years, and I think the moment you can accept change and that's a part of your life, it's the people that are stuck in that kind of grid. And I guess you speak with a lot of people at Touchstone. Just a quick question. You mentioned about forward in 5 years. That's really interesting. Where is property going to be in, let's talk about UK, in 5 to 10 years? Are we going to be changing the way we live? Because I keep reading about Dubai-esque living. You'll have more flats. There'll be less space. We've got scared. We're an island after all.
Yeah.
And how's that going to change?
Okay. So for me, I'm going to take you off to see Maslow now. Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. You need warmth, you need food, you need shelter, you need security. A house is ticking all of those boxes for me. a house, somewhere to live. Could be a flat, could be a house. Will humans still live in houses? Yes. Could those humans be more densely concentrated to make more use of scarce facilities like land? Yes, they could. But there's going to be an economic trade-off. There always is, supply and demand. And ownership of that land, ownership of that property. I see this in Monaco every day. I live in, some people say it's the most prestigious apartment block in the world.
In Monaco?
Yeah. And give you a ridiculous example. It's ridiculous to me. You can make up your mind, ridiculous good, ridiculous bad. But when you go in through my front door, I've got this coat cupboard on the left, okay? And it happens to be exactly 1 meter square. And it holds 10 coats. I'm going somewhere with this. The cost per square meter in my apartment block is 100,000
pounds, dollars,
pounds per square meter.
Wow.
I bought my first flat in London, the whole flat, for £9,000. Now let's cheat and let's call it 10. Every space that we hang one coat in our apartment block in Monaco is the entire value of my flat from 42 years ago. Now, if you look throughout the world for what happens when things get more scarce and more valuable, there's pretty much always an example. If you take Monaco, where you come into this the most expensive penthouse in the world was sold recently in our apartment block. I didn't buy it, for 400 million. 400 million for an apartment block. But opposite it's called the Tour Odeon. It's the big blue one in Monaco for anyone that's interested. Opposite it, there's some old monegasque, which is the name for people born in Monaco, 3 and 4 story accommodation. It's just had its windows been taken out. It's going to get turned into tower blocks. So at the minute, someone's just got this little, well, not little, it's quite a large family house, certainly by Monaco standards. But what's its value? Is its value as a house, or is its value as a building site for a tower block that's going to be sold for billions of pounds? Now, they're probably not going to get, I don't know, I could probably find out. They're not going to get billions of pounds, but they'll certainly get hundreds of millions. So a property that, 100 years ago, you could have bought for 10,000, francs probably, because that was so long before the euro. Suddenly, the price per square meter of it is, 100,000 is the finished price. So, even if they get 10 or 20,000 per square meter, times that number of floors, it's insane. It's worth.
That is crazy, isn't it? That's absolutely crazy. So, yes. but what are we saying with this though? We're saying if we go UK base, obviously property is going to keep going up, we believe. But now, but do you not think there's going to be a cap on a level at some point with property? Is it because we're just scarce in the UK? We've reached the amount of land. We can't build unless we build flats, and we're way under on the what the government have always said. Was it 300,000 or was it less than that?
They said 300,000 houses per year or homes per year. And because they weren't achieving that, various universities said 500,000 a year. And because Rishi was nowhere near it, he came up with a solution that meant he wouldn't miss the target. I don't know if you know what he did. He scrapped it. So there is no target now. So it's like, that's helpful, isn't it? So we were building approximately 50% of the target for the last 10 years, let's say. And because of that shortfall, the number you need to hit goes up, obviously. And because the government couldn't credibly say, oh, well, we didn't build 300,000, so we're now going to build 500,000, even though we've been building 150. So they just scrapped the target and called an election. Give somebody else the problem.
Yeah, well, exactly. And it's going to happen very soon, isn't it? So obviously this show's about real estate investors meeting with different types of asset classes. And for me at the moment, it's Bitcoin. Where did your journey come into Bitcoin? Because funny enough, I saw you pop up a few months ago about saying invest into Bitcoin. I was like, brilliant. I didn't know Paul was involved in Bitcoin. So that's why when I pinged you a message to get you on the channel, But how did you even get into it? Because obviously you're very bricks and mortar. Well,
Yes.
I assume you just bricks and mortar and that was it. But I guess you're just looking at asset type classes to benefit you.
Correct. So two or three different things took me to that point. Probably 7-8 years ago now. Annika, she's an accountant, by the way, which we sat down, we looked at our assets, and we have something crazy like 90% of our assets were in property. So a balanced portfolio, that's nuts. So we set ourselves some targets, 40% property, 10% precious metals, which for us is gold. We've got quite a lot of money now in private equity. So we've diversified in a broad range of asset classes. And we decided at that point that we would stick 1% in Bitcoin. This is 8 years ago. And the logic was, the logic was, well, if Bitcoin goes down to zero, well, I've lost 1% of my net worth. So what? I can live with that, especially if it's growing at 10% a year in the various, so I've lost 10% of 1 year's growth of my, it's a so what. If on the other hand, Bitcoin doubles in value, or goes up by a factor of 10 or 100, or like since we started, it's gone up by a factor of about 70 or something crazy.
What did you buy? Sorry, did you buy one coin?
What did we buy originally?
Actually, it was probably quite cheap then, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, I'm trying to remember the cheapest one we ever bought.
Ago.
Yeah, it wasn't
5,000 quid.
No, it was less than that. It was in the hundreds of dollars. Yeah. But roll that forward, and my view on Bitcoin here is, if you invest, if you've got a good amount of money, if you invest between 5 and 10% of your net worth into Bitcoin, I don't know what you think, but from here, given it's a scarce resource, given it's now an exchange traded fund, an ETF, given it's been accepted by the mainstream, given it's a treasury reserve asset, given that China, even though it's introduced a CBDC, it's kind of validated the idea of cryptocurrency for the rest of the world, because it's not Bitcoin, but it is crypto.
Yeah.
I personally, let's say, a couple of golden rules for me: don't leverage. So as long as it's cash, and as long as it's not, you haven't borrowed, and it's no more than 10%. Same rules. Let's say you've got £1 million, just make it up, which property investors easily can have. It's not hard for a property investor to have £1 million of equity. You buy a house, it doubles in value. You use that, you release that equity, you buy 2 or 3 more, they double in value. I'm talking about over 5 or 10 years, not tomorrow morning. But it's not hard for a property investor to end up with £1 million of equity. If rather than taking out 100K and using that as a deposit for another flat or another house or something, you take out that 100K and you put it into Bitcoin. Well, if you bought, so what's today's value of Bitcoin as we speak? It's about $63,000, $62,500.
Yeah.
Let's call it 60, just as an easy number. And if you've put 100K into Bitcoin and somehow it goes to zero, well, you've lost 100,000. You can't lose more than that, can you?
No.
And if you've got $1 million of property equity and you've just increased it a little bit, well, you might make a few £100 a month less. You're not really going to miss it. On the other hand, I cannot see a world where in the next 5 years, one Bitcoin isn't worth $1 million. So I think the upside is 10, 15, maybe even 20x. And if you've put 10% of your portfolio and it goes up by a factor of 20 times, well, 20 times 10% is 200%. You just tripled the value of your portfolio.
Yeah,
so
right.
The upside, you can double, triple, multiply your portfolio by a factor of 10. The downside is you lose 10%, which is, all right, that was painful, but because I believe that humans can tolerate a loss of 10%. They can. You'll find a way. You'll cope. 50%, 100%, financially, that can take you out of the game. So that's one thing that sort of brought me in that direction. The second thing that brought me in that direction was over the last few years, increasingly, I've seen, well, they've come to me, crypto millionaires have come to me, and they maybe invested 10 or 20K, 5, 10, 15 years ago, and it's now worth $1 million, 2 million, 3 million. And these are normal guys.
Property.
These are normal guys with normal jobs, and they're earning 40, 50 grand, guys and girls. But if you're earning 50 grand a year and your disposable income is 10 by the time you've paid your rent and whatever, if you've got 2 million in Bitcoin, that is as some experts would call it, a twitchy bottom moment, isn't it? It's like, now it really matters if it goes down. Because if you had 2 million and Bitcoin halves and now you've got 1 million, that's material to you if you're earning 50,000 a year. So they want to diversify. So they're going the other way. They're diversifying out of. So I'm working with all sorts of people, either property people that want to get into crypto or crypto people that want to get into property. But when I say crypto, by the way, Simon, I'm really talking about two things. I'm talking about Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those people that buys the latest coin or
the meme coins.
Punts on some programmer. I'm not going to buy a coin because it's got a picture of a dog on it, or whatever. So I'm a very traditional, straightforward kind of guy. But yeah,
me too. Well, I've got one addition to that, and it's Solana because of the network effect. And I don't know if you know much about it.
I see a lot of people talking about Solana. I'm not going to knock anyone for being into Solana, but anyone that's got a portfolio of 150 coins, I think they're mad. I think 147 of them are going to crash and burn, but whatever. 100%. That's what they want to do.
You say, it's diversification, isn't it? And when you said about fast forwarding 5 years, I'm really cautious of your time, by the way, because we've done an hour and it was only booked for an hour.
Yeah.
So there's one really interesting thing I wanted to ask you though. Recently I read an article and I think it was 10,000 millionaires are leaving the UK in 2024 predicted, which is double allegedly from 2023. What's your view on this? And is that the reason you left? Is there a hidden agenda here, about why people are leaving?
No. Okay.
Millionaires, sorry.
So 3 years ago is when we moved to Monaco. During lockdown by accident, by which I mean it wasn't planned, just before lockdown, like literally a few weeks before lockdown, we bought a villa in the south of France. Now, the idea was to do a flip, it was to do service accommodation. But anyway, if you had the choice between doing lockdown in the south of France or the south of Yorkshire, which would you pick? So we ended up doing most of lockdown in the south of France.
Nice.
And that got me a really good exposure to, let's call them the seas. I don't mean the high sea or the Mediterranean, although that's nice. Climate, culture, and cuisine. So those are the 3 C's. And when I sort of scored them, having lived there by accident for a year because of lockdown, they were getting loads more points than the UK was. Yes, there's a tax benefit of moving to Monaco. But if you just want to save tax, don't move to Monaco because it's expensive, it's difficult, it's a long-winded process. Go somewhere like Dubai or Thailand. I've got a friend in Thailand. He's got business.
I saw you actually, checking in over there. I remember seeing you on Facebook.
I was out there earlier this year. But in Thailand, for instance, if you've got a business in the UK and you've paid UK corporation tax, there's no tax in Thailand. And so there's plenty of places in the world you can go where you don't need any money. So Monaco, internationally, is actually quite difficult to get into versus many other places in the world. So the one reason that we went to, so as well as the seas, the climate, the cuisine and the culture, I would say the main reason that we moved to Monaco is network. Because I often say that your network is your net worth, the people you hang out with, the quality of the conversations. I mean, as a result of a friend, last week, Annika and myself were in northern Italy for 2 days. We were at the Pagani and the Lamborghini factories, and we actually sat down and just had lunch one-to-one with Fabio Lamborghini. So the chance to talk. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so it isn't all about
that you're sort of bumping with in Monaco, essentially. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not going to sort of sit here and reel off their names, but a number of
No.
people that we now know that are part of our circle are billionaires. We love Formula One, so we're mates with quite a few of the drivers and whatever. So that was the main reason, just network, but also the ability to do good in the world. Now, the answer to your other question, which you kind of asked me to at once there, why are so many people leaving the UK? Because the UK government is stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, to pick one example, non-doms, so the non-domiciled, very wealthy people. In my block, in the apartment block where I live, I've got one guy that I know really well. He used to live in Oxfordshire in a big fancy mansion. And in that big fancy mansion, he had 100 staff, gardeners, cooks, drivers. Him and his missus and his extended family used to live there. If they weren't spending $1 million a week in the UK on shopping, watches, clothes, cars, I don't know what they were doing. Think about the VAT that's gone. Think about the employment that's gone. And the day that announcement was made with regard to non-doms, we had people arriving to stay with friends in our block. It was the day. So the government don't realize how stupid they are. They make some announcement. They don't give it the conditioning with the wealthy. And yes, they are a kind of elite, but if you want money, then that sort of needs to be part of your network. The announcement wasn't even finished before they're on the phone to their people with private jets. And it's like, like you see on the films, wheels up in 20, and they just left. And they ain't coming back. They literally.
You talk about Alfie Best though, because he's leaving for Monaco as well, or has left Monaco.
I don't know Alfie. I've never talked to him. I did see that he's arrived. Yeah, I mean, it's such a small place. I'll probably bump into him at some point because there's only 6,000 Monegasques and there's only 30,000 residents like me. So it's like a small village.
It's really small, isn't it? Wow.
Very. But and so I'll meet him at the yacht club or the car club or something. But then you look at that and then you think, what kind of services do you get in the UK? Because when I go back to the UK, parts of it, not all of it, but parts of it look more and more like a third world country.
Yeah.
People sleeping on the streets.
Yeah.
The NHS, it's got an extra 8 million people on the waiting list. Well, hang on, 8 million people, that's like 1 in 6. That's extra on the waiting list. My mum needed an operation. They told her she was going to wait 3 years. She didn't even wait 3 days because I just paid for it. But most people can't. So, yeah, I think the simple core reason is government ineptitude. I mean, if, for instance, you want to set up Anniko's Hungarian. I'm British. I happen to have an Irish passport because my mum's Irish. So we can live anywhere in the EU. Why would you set up business in the UK where corporation tax is 25%? They make life difficult and they give you all kinds of grief all the time. When we could equally well go to Budapest. I don't know if you've ever been to Budapest.
I haven't, no.
Lovely city. It's in the European Union. Take euros, blah, blah, blah. Corporation tax is 9%. Why would you set up in the UK? And
this is stupid because they're just driving people out, which you kind of think, well, we were supposed to be a big crypto hub and we're the complete opposite. I won't go into too much detail, but trying to get banks, I had all my banks working from a business perspective, but also on a personal level, all trading, sending money across, it flowed beautifully. And then all of a sudden I couldn't send to those banks anymore. And you think, come on, guys, this is ridiculous.
We've seen that and we've had to move. So we tend to use, when we're buying, we don't sell really. We're what I think would get called diamond hand hodlers, yeah. But when we buy, we use Swissborg, but we've got accounts that are nothing to do with the UK because it's just it's just dangerous putting your money through the UK. Why would you? Anyway, I probably need to think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've kept you for long enough, and this was absolutely amazing. I mean, it's just good to catch up with you after so long. I mean, it's been so many years, and I hope Gordy and everybody else at Touchstone is doing well.
They're all good. Gordy just moved to Dubai.
I keep seeing him popping up. He's enjoying himself, isn't he? I'm actually going to be over there hopefully this year, so I'll look him up and give him a shout. But if people want to contact Touchstone, what's the best way for them to kind of get in touch if they're looking at sort of, you know, venturing into property investment?
Well, the easiest way is still the website, I think, touchstoneeducation.com, or come find me on Insta, TikTok, whatever. Yeah. Come and check out my hair and my teeth.
Thanks so much, Paul. It's really an honor to have you on the show. I really appreciate your time.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Simon. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.